Well, you're all very welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to yet another meeting to show solidarity with our friends of free Iran. It was decided that we should have a meeting in order to discuss the current situation with particular reference to Camp Ashraf and so-called Camp Liberty. But Iraq imposed increasingly repressive conditions on Liberty and turned it into a prison-like facility. And when the last convoy moved to from Ashraf to Liberty on the 4th of May last, 6 trucks full of essential daily needs of the residents that had been thoroughly inspected and approved at Ashraf by the Iraqi authorities supposed to move with the convoy to Liberty, were turned back midway and never arrived at their destination at Camp Liberty. The residents of Ashraf then announced, as a security measure, that as long as their property that was approved under the UN-Iraq agreement is not delivered to Liberty, then no further groups will make the move, and we support them in that. 2 months later, Iraq has not yet met this arrangement. There are several problems, but I would like to focus on 3 problems in particular. The first problem is, of course, the Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki. He takes his orders from Tehran. And we're not talking about a normal government. Maliki, what he's doing is actually criminal activity. The second problem is the negative role of the UN envoy in Iraq, Martin Kobler. He is not neutral in this particular situation. Instead, he is more like an advocate of the Iraqi government. The third problem is the United States and the State Department. This is unfortunate. They are part and parcel of the conspiracy. They're using dirty tactics to put maximum pressure on these defenceless people, for the State Department and the United Nations to put aside this attitude, and that instead of setting deadlines for the Iranian dissidents, they should announce a deadline for the Iraqi government to respect the terms of its agreement and correct all the breaches of the Memorandum of Understanding.
Now, if ever there was a clear case of insensitivity, of provocation by the Iraqis when they signed this MOU with Martin Kobler and then appointed aggressively this guy, Sadek, and indicted alleged murderer involved in the 2 previous massacres and put him in charge of the refugees in Camp Liberty. This is an outrage. And now, where we previously know that they were suffering from a lack of water, from poor broken down generators that were providing very little electricity, when the temperatures are soaring to 50 degrees and the heat is fantastic, when they were being denied even shelter or covers to build their own shelters from the sun, when they were being denied the materials to build pathways so that the disabled and people in wheelchairs can be taken across rough gravel-covered ground. They were being denied all of these things. But now Sadek has started an even more horrific level of oppression. And the people of Ashraf were not allowed to take their forklift trucks or any of their loading gear to enable such activities to take place in Camp Liberty. So the residents are forced to do all this by hand in the searing heat, and UNAMI are witnessing all this. Now, constant complaints are being made to UNAMI, and if the UN in New York and the Americans themselves not only refuse to take action and to really start to shout at Nouri al-Maliki that this is completely unacceptable, this is not the way that you can treat unarmed refugees. Rather than do that, the US State Department are shouting at the PMOI, are shouting at the people of Liberty. So I say now to you, before we break up for this summer, we need to send the clearest possible message yet again to Hillary Clinton and to the State Department. This kind of behavior is quite intolerable. You cannot allow Maliki and his thugs to go on treating innocent refugees in this way. And we will not condone the movement of the final 1,200 until you realize that you have to force Maliki to fulfill his conditions under the MOU and make sure these people in a humanitarian way. And until those conditions are fulfilled, those 1,200 will remain in Camp Ashraf and the stalemate will continue. So I send this final message to the Iraqis themselves. Any further attempt at oppression and violence is going to be noted at the highest levels. Everybody in Europe now, everyone in this House, is watching every step that you make in Camp Liberty. We are noting down and watching everything that you do in Liberty and Ashraf.
And there are very strong signs of hope that the Iranian regime is going to collapse sooner or later, better sooner. But at the same time, there are conditions just to annihilate, to destroy the best organized advanced group of opposition, which is still there. And we are bound to take responsibility for their well-being, their lives, to preserve them for the future of free Iran. The UN has lost its credibility as a neutral mediator. It has not succeeded to provide safety and security for these people, or to speed up the interviewing process, making interviews on the spot on absolutely abnormal conditions.
We are dealing with a government that unfortunately follows the instruction, is under the influence of the Iranian regime, of the mullahs, whose objective is to eliminate, to suppress, to erase the democratic opposition. So we will insist that the Iraqi government must give the responsibility of liberty to people that at least could raise some trust from us. And my third point is what some of my colleagues in the British Parliament have called the blackmailing of Ashraf residents by the US State Department. They link the relocation of Ashraf residents to liberty as a condition for other political moves that in fact should not be linked to this, because every issue has its own space of validity. So the PMOI should be delisted in the United States, because this is what the Department of State must do, and this is what the court in Washington has ruled. So this is one thing, and the relocation is a different thing. So we should not link the two things, because if we link the two things, it can sound like blackmailing. Okay? So one thing is one thing is the other thing. So until now, 2,000 residents have been moved to liberty in 5 groups without the minimum humanitarian standards being met, and the US government and the United Nations kept postponing the realization of these minimums to the relocation of the next convoy every time, and now there are still 1,300 people in Ashraf. And for me, it is clear that Ashraf residents are eager to keep their promise and to move to liberty as soon as these minimum humanitarian conditions are realized. These minimum standards can be found in a statement that we released on the 8th of July and are really the minimum we could ask. And I want to remind Prime Minister Maliki that according to his behavior today, he will be just in the future. And as we say in Spanish, time is very long. And at the end of the day, every one of us will get what he has deserved. Remember, Mr. Malik. Thank you very much.